that would be one example of someone who's an academic skeptic. There's another strain of skepticism that we get from ancient Greece, as well as various Asian philosophers, called Pyrrhonian or universal skepticism. This is the view that we can't know anything at all, that essentially whatever account of knowledge we come up with, whether it's the JTB account or some other account of knowledge, we never really meet that bar because there's always some reason to doubt what we think we know, right? Whether it's your birthday or who your parents are or what the planet, what the order of the planets is. Because if you look back at history, we seem to always be wrong about everything. We are always updating our quote unquote knowledge. And it seems like whatever conditions for knowledge we give, we never really meet them. So according to Pyrrhonian skeptics, all because knowledge requires certainty and we're never certain about anything. Another challenge to knowledge that often comes up is relativism. And I think it's really important to emphasize here just how influential this view has become, especially in the last, I don't know, I would say maybe 30 or so years. And even more pronounced than that, in my view, is how prominent relativism has become in this new age of fake news and misinformation online. A lot of people seem to be relativists, whether they know it or not, about knowledge. And there's a lot of other interesting things we could say here about this topic. But relativism, very roughly, is that truth just depends upon what a person believes. This is called subjective relativism. And if you're a subjective relativist, you think, look, if a person thinks it's true, then it's true. Sometimes people are cultural relativists. They think that, well, if a culture believes something is true, then it's true. But I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of people who might be more apt or more prone to believe in subjective relativism. Maybe you've heard people say online or in person, well, that's not my truth. One thing we should point out, though, is that I think many times people conflate opinions and beliefs with knowledge, right? So, of course, we can all have opinions on something, but whether or not it's knowledge, that's a different question. So I think when people say things like, that's your truth, not my truth, I really think when people say that, they really mean, that's not my experience. Maybe that's your experience. So we might be just playing a little fast and loose with some of these terms, but I think nonetheless, it's safe to say that subjective relativism has become a very prominent view, given the rise of the internet age and given the rise of news ecosystems, the bubbles that we might live in, where people genuinely live in different realities, perhaps. And so I wish we could spend more time talking about that, but I do think that relativism, it's safe to say, poses unique challenge to the view that knowledge is objective, right? Because if everyone just lives in their own world and what's true for you isn't true for me, then obviously that's going to pose a lot of problems for not only our conceptions of knowledge, but the functioning of healthy societies. So let's talk about the kinds of skepticism, or just fill in some of the details there. So again, Pyrrhonian or universal skepticism is usually the view that we should totally suspend our beliefs or claims to knowledge because no knowledge is possible. And then again, academic skepticism, we're just completely ignorant of knowledge from especially the senses. And as I have some pictures here, again, lots of influence from ancient Greek philosophy. This is Rene Descartes, and also some Chinese and Buddhist philosophers have contributed to skepticism, the skepticism literature, excuse me. Sometimes there are what are called moderate skeptics, and there are plenty of those in the history of philosophy. So this is David Hume. There is also Confucius, who advocates a kind of moderate particular skepticism. So if you're of this sort, then there are important realms which cannot be known. So usually if you're a moderate skeptic, you think, again, there are areas that we just can't know, like whether it's God or metaphysics or an afterlife or some things like that. We couldn't know them even if we wanted to. Okay, they evade the capabilities of the human mind and human knowledge. So if you're that kind of skeptic, you think, well, we might have some knowledge, but it might be rather limited. And there's certainly areas of human endeavor that we can't know because it goes beyond the bounds of what can be known anyway. Okay, so hopefully you're getting the sense that skepticism can come in degrees of a spectrum. Not every skeptic is of the same view, but certainly there are different sorts of skepticism that we can lay out and that come from different parts of the world and time periods. Okay, so let's talk about one very influential person who's had a big impact on the history of philosophy. This is René Descartes. He is a French philosopher. There are his years. Very influential mathematician, natural philosopher, metaphysician. He was responsible for championing an emerging worldview in the 17th and 18th centuries called mechanical philosophy, which sounds pretty, when we describe it, it sounds pretty familiar to our more modern conceptions of science, but it was quite a unique view to take at the time Descartes lived. What Descartes thought is that we can essentially describe nature by using pure mechanics like physics. And that was quite a unique view because prior to Descartes, there were a lot of views about how the universe worked that relied a lot on religions or on theology or God's working. And Descartes, who was religious himself, thought that, well, we can understand matter and motion by just looking at the mechanics of how those things work.